I'm Kate. Let's talk theater. Today, we're going to be talking about the new musical, Redwood, starring Idina Menzel. I cannot believe how much I loved this musical, only because I went in with no expectations, knowing nothing, not really even hearing about its run in California. Went in pretty blind, and I had a great time. I'm going to cut to me on the night that I saw the show, kind of getting unready and chatting about it a little bit, and then we will kind of loop back and do more of an official review. So let's look at that footage there. So I just got back from Redwood the musical. I'm stunned. I'm so glad I went. I really didn't know what I was getting into, and I don't know, I'm almost surprised. I had no expectations, and yet my expectations were blown away. I thought it'd be nice to have some initial thoughts before I maybe really sit down and talk about it. So I'm going to hydrate, I'm going to eat a chops, and then we will get unready from Redwood the musical. Redwood the musical, I mean, can you believe? Can you believe? I am getting unready. I had my snack. Just realized I didn't drink water. We'll do that. I went on TikTok instead. That's fine. I'm stunned. I'm stunned. I was front row. Okay, so I won the lottery, and with Broadway Direct lotteries, you usually don't get the tickets until closer to the show. And so I'm like being kind of neurotic about it for no reason, but I just want to know, I hate waiting for it. I want to know what I'm gonna get. I'm always a little bit nervous that it's gonna be like a rough seat, right? Like I want something. I want something good. I'm always afraid that it's going to be, especially in the Nederlander, like if you're a little too over. When I was there for Mr. Saturday Night, we were orchestra left, probably like 4 and 5 in, and they were just like, same thing with Tommy, a little bit to the side. It's nothing crazy, but you're not getting the full effect. So when I found out we were orchestra left the first 2, oh my God. Now it does seem like they save those because they don't seem to be on sale. So I'm going to assume they're for Rush or Lottery. Definitely a trippy show to be sitting that close. I feel like it's not often that there is a show out there that I kind of want to see right up close, but I also kind of want to know what it's like in the mess. So if you don't know, with Redwood the musical, there's all these projections. It's basically just projections. There's no real set. So there's also projections on the floor, so that was something that you're that close up, you're not going to get the full effect for. Or I guess I shouldn't even say full effect, it's just a completely different experience to be in one part of the theater versus likely another, which is amazing work. So we're going to get this makeup off. It stayed pretty decently. I felt like doing a little bit of a fall color for Redwood, for trees, for nature. I had no expectations. I saw that picture of her up by the tree, and I saw pictures of like the white when you walk in, but that was it. Like really seeing it in person and realizing like, wow, the set, there's no set. Like this is gonna be whatever it's gonna be. Just blew me away. And I was thinking, like, we're seeing a lot of projections, a lot of really good projections lately on Broadway. Back to the Future used projections. The Great Gatsby used projections to kind of build out their sets. Maybe Happy Ending has a couple of really cool, but one very incredible projection moment. And so I've been seeing shows where it's very much an accessory. Just wow. Like I'm wowed. To see a show that is like entirely utilizing projections in this gorgeous, immersive way. To see, do we want to do this? Yeah, we'll do this. To see a show too, and it's so intimate. These projections really close in the stage. I don't think the Nederlander particularly has a huge stage as it is, but just, oh my God, please. just stunning, like just stunning work. I mean, they have to get a scenic tone. Like they gonna be like the technical show? I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, everybody was so amazing. And it's such a small show. There's only 5 people. I think the Netherlanders are a perfect theater for them. Truly. Just unreal. Like, I'm still not even, I think, processing the fact that I was like, honestly, not even necessarily a foot. Those seats are so close to the stage. I was so close to Idina freaking Menzel. Oh my god. She is just amazing. The belting, the sound, the volume is, oh my god, it's past my bedtime. The volume that she can emit out of her body, just amazing. So glad she blesses us with a Broadway return once every 10 years. Just amazing work. Amazing, amazing work. I am struggling today. Just incredible. I want to think about it. I want to think about the themes. I want to think about the real world, the Redwoods, the everything properly when I get a chance at some point, but I don't know. I just felt like I needed to get on and be like, wow. Like, I was just wowed. I was scared because I knew this was a show that was going to tackle addiction, which is very much shared in the ticket buying process. Which I didn't even know that until I had the tickets already. Like, I knew nothing about this musical other than that tree picture. And so I knew trees had to be involved. But I didn't know how much, which is stupid because it's called Redwood, but leave me alone. But I was scared. I was scared that it was going to feel like, oh, this is another Days of Wine and Roses. Like, I'm going to walk out literally traumatized. I'm going to be dreading going to work the next day because of this musical. And instead, I left inspired and devastated in all of the things. It's a maybe happy ending. It's a Notebook. It reminds me of parts of If Then, really. Just amazing and sad. There's a sadness, I think, to seeing so many musicals on Broadway right now that are about loss, about grief. I hope this musical sticks around. I do wonder sometimes if the Notebook was like too much about grief and loss, and that was it. And if that was too much for people. Whereas Redwood has this overtone of, yes, hope and grief and loss and moving forward, but also this beauty of nature and the metaphors that they use with the Redwoods. It was so good. It was so good. It's only been out for a few days, so I wonder how the general public will really react. But I'm excited to know. I think this needs to do well, and it absolutely should. Incredible. Crying, love crying. Just brilliant. That's all I got. Face is done. Bedtime it is. So I saw this show 6 days after it opened. And again, I went in with no expectations and I was blown away. Right off the bat, I won the lottery for this and I won front row. Orchestra left and orchestra right, the front row, it seems like they're not on sale. It seems like they must be set aside for lottery or rush. So that was beautiful. I mean, that really made the experience. I would be very curious to see what that looks like from afar, but being that close with some of the screens actually going to the side, and I'll show a video here. it made it that much more immersive. I cannot imagine being on stage and seeing all of this stuff. It must have been something to get used to. I feel like I would be very dizzy. I did a Canadian Parliament tour that was like this because their actual building was closed, and so they had things moving around, and I genuinely felt ill. So I really question how the actors are doing this all of the time, because I don't know if I could do it. Very baseline plot, without giving any spoilers. It's a woman, played by Idina Menzel. Character's name is Jessie, going through grief and loss and healing through nature, through the Redwoods. The story is beautiful. I think they did a really good job of balancing this very powerful and emotional story with lighthearted airs and comedy. I think they were really hitting that balance really well, and it felt like a build. I think a show like The Notebook, for instance, I was crying within the opening number. Like, that show is so sad, and I think that chased some people away, whereas with Redwood, it's obviously very sad, but it felt like a build. It felt like we were getting to it, and so when it finally hit you, I think it won't chase people away. I was worried, because this does have themes of addiction in it, that this was going to feel like Days of Wine and Roses, where I was just like tense and traumatized in my seat, and this was definitely not that. It's ebbs and flows, and there's still hope, and there's still love, and the other characters help really balance out what Jessie is going through. So that's a little bit about the story. I won't get much more into the story because I don't want to spoil it, but I do think it's really well done. And the lack of set, we kind of play back and forth with her and where she is, but also moments of memories, really using the projections as a way to bring her in and out of maybe what she's reflecting on, some of her dreams, nightmares, traumas. Very, very, very well done. And again, it's a very sad story, but I think it has payoff that will not chase people away. It doesn't feel like you're going to a sad musical, even though it's definitely sad, but I think there's a difference. The music, I loved the music. It definitely sounds like nothing I would otherwise probably assume I would feel attracted to. It must be written for Idina Menzel. It has to be. It just beautifully fits her voice. It had to have been written with her in mind, and she was kind of involved in the production of this, so that makes sense. You definitely hear it. It's definitely using her to your best abilities. I really love that it feels like every character kind of has their own sound, and it feels like it has a little bit of a folksy undertone. It sounds very pop musical, but in a way that's just a little bit different. The production is really cool. There are times where there are these sort of vocals. I think they call them the trees. It says it in here somewhere. Oh, vocals for the trees, yeah. It's pop, but there's a little bit of folksiness. There's a little bit of bluesy, maybe. I don't know. Like, it just sounds so different from anything that's out there right now, in my opinion. Everything Becca does is art. I was locked in. Kyla Wilcoxon, incredible. I was locked in. I was ready to go. I was enthralled. And that is incredible work. I think for every single person to really stand out and have their moment and not feel like the musical is swallowed up by Idina Menzel, I think that's such a feat of both the writing but also the star power of every single person in that musical. It's not to say that Idina Menzel is the end all, the be all of talent, right? She's amazing. She's the star for a reason. But I think a musical that feels like it was so clearly written for Idina Menzel, but then still allows everybody else to really shine, that is a feat. Speaking of cast, let's get a little bit more into the characters. So obviously we have Idina Menzel, who's Jessie. We have Deidre Aziza, who plays Mel. That is Jessie's wife. We then have Michael Park, who plays Finn, and then Kyla Wilcoxon. They are researchers. They are the ones getting Jessie involved in the trees, learning about them, climbing them, doing all of the things. We then have Zachary and Noah Picer, who plays Spencer. And that is the son. So that's it. That's the cast. And I love that. I love that. It just still feels so full. Again, they all have such star power that I just feel like you're not even going to notice that there are only 5 people in this musical because they all have such a presence. What helps is then set design. The set, and I'll show it again, it completely kind of closes in the stage. I wouldn't call the Nederlander like a huge stage to begin with, but they definitely shrink it down a little bit more. And so between the projections and the very few set pieces and these powerhouse actors and actresses, it just feels so encapsulating, and it feels so full and so full of life, even when it is a very, very small cast. They just are all so incredible. Choreography, very minimal. Idina Menzel is a mover. I think we have all figured that out, especially post If Then. Girlfriend's a mover, and we love that for her. Very minimal choreography, which is also incredible, again, that I never felt like I missed it. I was never sitting there going, oh, I wish they would move or dance or do this. They are acting, they are giving vocals and giving acting so phenomenally that not once was I was like, oh, I needed them to move a little bit more. I needed them to go here. I needed them to go there. Again, there's a lot of movement going on with these projections at a lot of different moments in the show. And so it feels like it's really the world is moving around them while they are more still and acting through their song. And I think that's really cool. There is a little bit of tree climbing choreography, which is used throughout. And being front row and having a moment where they are climbing and you're just like, whoa. It was very trippy. It was very trippy. It was very cool. So overall, I loved this musical. It was amazing. I think I would definitely go again. I would go again. I would absolutely go again. I would also love to see the standby specifically for Jessica Phillips. I kind of want to know what she does a little bit differently. Again, Idina Menzel's voice is so distinct and it's so written for her. I would love to hear somebody else in the role. And so I'm kind of considering looking to see if there's at any point any dates that kind of end up being announced for Jessica Phillips to go on, because I would want to see that. Overall, this is a beautiful show. I think it's a show that to a certain extent anyone can relate to. When there's a show about grief and loss and love and the human experience, it's going to touch everyone in some way. Obviously, there's addiction and some specific themes, and it's something you have to be ready to really sit with. And obviously, some people are going to relate to the specifics more than others. I think, too, a musical about reconnecting with nature at a time where we are so sucked in to tech and moving and going and moving and going, and the meditative effects of nature and the ways we really need to slow down and basically relearn to sit with our own thoughts. I think that's a big part of this musical as well. In reconnecting with nature, it's really allowing yourself to feel and to process and not feel like your mind has to be busy every second. And that's the easy part, right? In the short term, we push all of our stuff away and we go and we scroll and we work and we move. But there does come a time where that really piles up and it's either going to explode out or we need to deal with it. And I think we see that journey unfold for Jessie. I think it's interesting to think about how many musicals feel like they're coming out right now about grief and loss. I do wonder if part of that is this sort of mass trauma that we are experiencing, and we're always experiencing something. I think with maybe in a post-COVID world, we've really needed to face grief in a different way. I'm wondering where this is coming from and why now. I think there are a lot of things you can point to say, okay, these are sort of mass experiences of grief. But the pandemic is definitely one that I think of on just such a grand scale. It was just really inescapable. Whereas I think a lot of mass tragedies, unfortunately, again, because we're always scrolling, and there's this very short news cycle, it's easier to ignore a lot of others. Whereas this mass illness was not something anybody could really completely pretend wasn't happening. So I do wonder if it's something we'll continue to see. I do wonder if this will sort of do what Days of Wine and Roses wanted to do. It's definitely different. Again, it's a story of addiction, but it's from the other perspective. Whereas Days of Wine and Roses, you were very in it along with them. And I think that's what made it such a hard watch. And it was a beautiful musical, and I'm glad I went. It was technically incredible, but Days of Wine and Roses was definitely a hard thing to ask somebody to sit through. And I think Redwood, again, perfectly balances the really hard stuff with the really beautiful and the really hopeful and the funny too. Finding the light and the fun and the joy in these really hard things. And that is definitely something we need right now. So overall, I love this musical. I highly recommend it. I also want to share too that it's not that pricey. It's not that pricey. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. We're still talking like on a scale of Broadway shows, right? Like it's still pricey, but it's so small that it is, compared to some other shows, not horrible. So looking at a weekday evening, which I went on a Thursday evening. So I always like to look at shows and look at their most expensive tickets, because I think that that's the most fair way to compare them, right? The back of the house, like the cheapest ticket, for a place like the Palace or the Majestic or the Schubert, that's so far away. Whereas the Nederlander is quite a small theater, right? So I don't think that's really a fair comparison with the bigger versus the smaller, but everybody's going to have a front row. Or front couple of rows, because some front rows, like the Lunt-Fontanne, the first 2 rows, end up being a little bit cheaper because they're actually too close. So, okay, work with me here. Front of orchestra at Redwood for a Thursday evening performance. That is when I went. So that is what I'm comparing. You're also not too close to the stage at all, being front row, that it is really, it's not too high. You're pretty level with it. Obviously, there are moments where they're literally up because they're climbing trees. So, I mean, the neck, move your neck around, do some nice exercises there. But front of orchestra for a Thursday evening is $269. Is that still expensive? Obviously. But that's cheaper than Moulin Rouge. It's cheaper than Gypsy, right? There are shows that we're seeing that are easily $300 and change, $400 and change, right? So seeing a show that caps at $269 on an evening, again, I think that is solid, that is fair. Then that also means that you can spend as little as $80. Or for instance, you could spend $100 for last row center. I've been pretty far back in the Nederlander and been pretty happy with it. So I think that that's a fair range, especially for a small theater. Again, this is all in the context of everybody's idea of affordability is different, but Broadway is really expensive. So I just want to point out, I assume because it's a smaller show, there's only 5 people in it. They then don't have to have a ton of standbys. They have these projections rather than a bajillion set pieces that they're storing in the back. It definitely seems like that makes it a little friendlier on the budget. And again, it also helps that even if you pay for the last seat in the house, it's the Nederlander, you're going to have still a pretty good experience, where there are definitely larger Broadway theaters that may be charging more than that for the worst seat in the house, and it's shoved in the corner because it's such a huge place and you're missing parts of the show. So I would definitely recommend checking this out. Redwood, the musical, it's a gorgeous one. It is phenomenal. It is stunning. And I see this being a contender. I feel like everybody, we're talking a lot about the revivals. We're talking a lot about Sunset and Gypsy and Audra and Nicole. And yes, they have the insane vocals and prowess, but what Idina Menzel has been given to work with, to me, is so meaty, and it is just a masterclass watching her act through this show. It is incredible work. So I think Redwood could really be a huge show of the season if we pay attention. So highly recommend checking it out. Highly recommend looking into it. Hopefully we get an album, because I will be tuned in. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe, like, comment, do all of the things that can help my channel grow. I would greatly appreciate it. Find me on social media. The links are below. And I will see you next time to talk more theater. Bye.